Traditional thinking would suggest that WWE should save the biggest, most marketable matches they have for the rare occasions where fans actually have to hand over some of their hard-earned cash to watch the show. Though pay-per-view was once the lifeblood of the company, that hasn't stopped them from basically giving away dollar-drawing matches for free on television. Obviously, ratings and goodwill with the fans are important, but WWE clearly left some giant piles of money on the table when they opted to put these bouts on for nout. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 insane matches WWE gave away on free TV. Join us. Number 10, Brock Lesnar vs Hulk Hogan. Nostalgia Mania was running wild in 2002, brother, when Hulk Hogan returned to WWE after an almost decade-long absence. Though he came in as a hated heel and member of the New World Order, it wasn't long before Hogan's fawning fans had him back in the red and yellow, the strength of his reactions convincing Vince McMahon to make him the undisputed champion. After that experiment failed, WWE Creative tried a different approach and decided to use the aging legend to help the up-and-coming crop of stars like Edge, Kurt Angle, and Brock Lesnar. The next big thing may have been new to the business, but WWE had the Rocket strapped firmly to his massive back, and nobody, not even Hulk Hogan, could stop him. WWE booked the two against one another in the main event of the August 8, 2002 episode of SmackDown, with Brock's undisputed title match at SummerSlam against The Rock at stake. Had the match been booked a couple of months down the road at, say, Survivor Series, as was the plan for a proposed rematch, it could have drawn a few bucks. As it was, though, WWE used Hogan to put the rookie over strong en route to his showdown with the Great One. Number 9, Bret Hart vs SYCHO Sid. All hell broke loose just days before WrestleMania 13, when Bret Hart challenged SYCHO Sid for the WWE title inside a steel cage in the main event of Monday Night Raw. Obviously done in part to add intrigue ahead of the showcase of the Immortals and tease the fact that the Hitman submission match with Stone Cold Steve Austin could become a championship affair, this was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Raw main events to that point. Having a WWE title match, let alone a stipulation match like this on regular WWE television, was still a rare occurrence, and its pay-per-view credentials were underscored by the fact that Bret and Sid had collided in a pay-per-view main event at In Your House It's Time just a few months earlier. As a match, it's nothing special, but it really set the table for Mania, and the involvement of Stone Cold and The Undertaker during and after the bout made for exciting scenes. Though the match itself was standard stuff, the post-match angle with the four-way brawl, along with the excellence of Execution's expletive-laden rant and confrontation with Vince McMahon, was pure gold and helped make the WWE title seem like the most prestigious prize in wrestling. Number 8, John Cena vs Shawn Michaels. John Cena and Shawn Michaels first squared off in singles action in the main event of the 2005 Halloween episode of Raw, the non-title affair going to a no contest when Kurt Angle ran in to build up to their triple threat match at Taboo Tuesday the next night. Michaels vs Cena didn't quite have the feel of a mouth-watering blockbuster pay-per-view headliner then, but it certainly did when the two next clashed in another Raw main event 18 months later. A non-title rematch of their WrestleMania 23 WWE title main event, the Heartbreak Kid and Big Match John famously went a full hour in front of an enthusiastic crowd inside London's Earl's Court. Michaels went over on Cena after exhaustingly falling on top of him following Sweet Chin music, which begs the question, why didn't these two have one more singles pay-per-view match to settle things at Backlash rather than the multi-man match with added Edge and Orton? In any event, Michaels vs Cena only happened a handful of times, and it's curious that WWE had the majority of their offerings go down on free TV. Number 7, The Rock and Steve Austin versus the New World Order. Well, that is just a borderline hilarious amount of star power now, isn't it? When Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall returned to WWE in February of 2002, fans began fantasy booking the matches they'd hoped to have seen during the Monday Night Wars or Ill-Fated Invasion, in particular the Hulkster versus The Rock and Steve Austin in singles matches. Hogan and the People's Champion had their epic show-stealing encounter at WrestleMania 18, but Stone Cold vetoed the idea of going one-on-one with the Immortal One. He would happily go up against Hulk in a handicap match on the WrestleMania 18 Go-Home episode of Raw, however, teaming up with The Rock to take on the NWO in the show's main event. This would be the only time Hogan and Austin would trade blows, and it's frankly bizarre that WWE wouldn't ask fans to pay to see it. Amazingly, this was Hogan's first televised WWE match since King of the Ring 1993 too, and WWE just threw it out there with pretty much no build in order to increase anticipation for a match that really had already sold itself. Number 6, Roman Reigns vs. Rey Mysterio. A Hell in a Cell match for the WWE Universal title on SmackDown, located entirely within the Thunderdome? You better believe WWE decided to treat fans to Roman Reigns defending against Rey Mysterio inside the steel structure without asking them to cough up a penny or subscribe to the network. The match had originally been scheduled to take place at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view itself, but WWE made the decision to move it 2 days earlier instead. It was a surprising move to say the least, and evidently it was one that was made for no good reason. Reports at the time suggested WWE just decided to move it to SmackDown because, screw it, why not? Mysterio's first ever Hell in a Cell match ended up being the first ever Cell match in SmackDown history, helping to boost the show's ratings. WWE then opted to give the Cell stipulation to Bianca Belair and Bayley's SmackDown Women's title match at the pay-per-view. Truth be told, the pandemic era is a bit of a blur, and those crowdless shows all tend to blend together, but Reigns vs. Rey inside the Cell was still a crazy match to have on regular TV. Number 5, TLC 3 and TLC 4. When a group of WWE stars are prepared to take their bodies to the limit in an untested gimmick match, it's only natural that the company would put that type of spectacle on pay-per-view. There was a real curiosity when it came to the original TLC match between the Hardys, Dudleys, and Edge and Christian at SummerSlam 2000, and there is no doubt that many fans coughed up to see what the sextet of daredevils would do with the assorted plunder at their disposal. The match was such a success that WWE booked the sequel for WrestleMania X7. 7 weeks later, the threequel with bonus Benoit and Jericho main evented the May 24th, 2001 edition of SmackDown. Rather than take it easy on free TV, the 8 competitors threw caution to the wind and put on a performance that would have fit right in at the granddaddy of them all. Seeking a ratings boost for the Raw brand 18 months later, WWE presented TLC 4 as the main event of the first Raw Roulette-themed episode of the show. Both matches for free, yet you had to pay to see Kane attempting revenge for the whole Katie Vick debacle just a couple of weeks later. Number 4, Kurt Angle vs. The Undertaker. WWE booked Kurt Angle vs. The Undertaker in championship bouts on several occasions between 2000 and 2006. An intriguing clash of styles and characters, the Dead Man vs. the Olympic Hero was a natural matchup that seemed to only get better with age. In their initial meetings, there was a clear imbalance, as Taker was the established, already legendary star, while Kurt was young in his career, if not already on his way to being a fully fledged headliner. Their best match against one another was most likely their World Heavyweight title main event from No Way Out 2006, a thrilling contest that really ought to have been on the WrestleMania card a month later. Because of its quote-unquote controversial finish, WWE booked the rematch not for the grandest stage of them all, but for 2 weeks later on SmackDown. Once again, the two workhorses tore the house down and put on a WrestleMania caliber showing, strengthening calls for the trilogy to be capped off at Mania itself. Didn't happen, of course, though I bet people would have stumped up for it. Number 3, Jeff Hardy vs. Shawn Michaels. In his earlier WWE days, Jeff Hardy was often likened to Shawn Michaels. Both were young, naturally talented, took risks, and had that intangible it factor that made people gravitate towards them, so the comparison was an apt one. And Hardy, like Michaels, also burned out and had to leave WWE during what could and should have been some banner years. When the charismatic Enigma returned, the showstopper was in his second spell with the company, and though he was a changed man, was every bit the superlative performer he had been in his pomp. The only time the two crossed paths was, somewhat randomly, in the main event of the February 11th, 2008 episode of Raw. Jeff's popularity was skyrocketing, while Shawn was in in the autumn of his in-ring career, and it made for a very interesting dynamic. Given 20 minutes to play with, the two had a barn burner that you'd have been more than happy to pay for. Not that I'm mad that we didn't have to, mind. The lack of a rematch, on the other hand, boils my blood to this very day. Number 2, John Cena versus Shinsuke Nakamura. They call John Cena Big Match John for a reason. It's because JBL said it on commentary once and it stuck, even though it's a pretty lame nickname, all things considered. Regardless, Cena is one of WWE's biggest stars ever, and almost by default, any match he's in feels like a big deal. Especially when it's against another performer with a superstar aura and reputation, like the King of Strong Style himself, Shinsuke Nakamura. With a shot against WWE champion Jinder Mahal at SummerSlam on the line, Cena and Shinsuke collided in the main event of the August 1st, 2017 episode of SmackDown. By rights, it probably should have been Nakamura versus Cena in a WWE title match at the biggest party of the summer, but the Mahal experiment was in full flow, and so they went at it on the Blue Show instead. A much better match than Shinsuke's loss to Jinder, Nakamura versus Cena was a belting TV main event that came at just the right time, with Nakamura on the rise and Cena settling into his role as a beloved elder statesman who still dressed like a 12-year-old baby. Would have been well worth my $9.99 that month, and then some. Number 1, Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle. WWE knew well in advance that they wanted Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle, and they wanted it at WrestleMania. An amateur enthusiast's wet dream, the next big thing against the Olympic hero was a battle that didn't need a soap opera storyline or any other gimmicks or tomfoolery to make it special. WWE only booked 3 televised singles matches between Brock and Kurt, the first of which closed out WrestleMania 19 in style, the second of which was the highlight of SummerSlam 2003, and the third of which took up more than half of a SmackDown broadcast. With Angle and Lesnar tied 1-1 when it came to their singles matches, WWE presented the 1-hour Iron Man rubber match on free television. That is right, 2 of the very best wrestlers on the planet doing what they do best for an entire 60 minutes, and all fans had to do was make sure to tune in at the right time. One of the biggest and best free TV matches in WWE history, it ended the Angle vs Lesnar rivalry on a high note, though you do wonder why it wasn't reserved for an order-only occasion. Nowadays, you don't get Brock Lesnar to come to the arena for less than a small fortune, never mind wrestling for an hour on television.